Hi guys, Crevasse is finally upon us in DFFOO Global, and in this video I'll be giving a quick overview about the event, since this is a fairly new event type for us in Global, as well as provide a couple of tips to complete this event and meet the minimum score required to get all rewards. So first off, what is Crevasse? If you've been around when Dare to Defy released, it's a very similar concept in that there are 7 consecutive stages overall. 2 are Shinryu difficulty, 3 are base Lufenia difficulty, 1 chaos and 1 cosmos difficulty, signified by the quest level on the bottom left of each stage. Similar to Dare to Defy, this is a lockout event, meaning that once you use a party character in your main party and you complete the stage with a perfect, that party character is now locked to the stage and you cannot use the same character across multiple stages. If you want, you can unlock any perfect that you get by going to the quest overview and hitting the remove perfect. If you do so, however, you will lose the points that you've accumulated for that stage, but you will then release those locked characters so that you can use them in other stages. You should really only use the remove perfect if you really want to replan and redo the stages all over again. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend hitting this button. Also, in Crevasse, no friend units are allowed, in case you're wondering, so you cannot use any friend units at all. You can only rely on your main party, but you do have the flexibility of the call abilities as well as Ultima weapons. Now, the one big difference in Crevasse versus Dare to Defy is that you have codes. So there's an edit code button in every stage as such, and the codes are there to provide you points. So for example, if you go to the edit button, you see that there are various codes here with points, and you see like a plus number at the bottom right of each code. So from the +2 to the +3 all the way to +7 and more. In case you're wondering why some of the codes are grayed out, that's because when you use a code, the codes are also locked to the stage. So the grayed out codes that you see here represent codes that I have used in my run across all 7 stages, which means that you cannot use the same code in more than one stage. So again, as an example, if you use the stuff ×1 code, the code will be grayed out and you can't use it again in another stage. The more restrictive the code, so for example, if you compare Great Sword ×2, which requires you to use 2 Great Sword characters, versus Great Sword ×1, the Great Sword ×2 being more restrictive will provide you higher points. And there are even weapon type ×3, so unique or Great Sword or Short Sword ×3, which gives you the sort of most points overall. Same goes for the color crystals. So you do have green, yellow, or black crystal ×3, and typically those provide you most points. And you also have crystal color ×2 and crystal color ×1. Not all codes are equal in weightage. So for example here, white crystal ×1 only gives you +2, whereas red crystal ×1 gives you +3. The difference might seem small, but whenever possible, try to squeeze out as many points as you can, because you do want to aim for as high a score or as high a point as possible. Now, to get the rewards for this event, I'll just go back to Crevasse. If you look at the event details, there is a section on rewards. And from here you can actually see that to get all the so-called meaningful rewards, you really only need 350 points, because beyond 350 points you only get 3 tickets for each additional 25 points that you get. So to unlock every single reward on this event, you do need a minimum of 425 points. But if you're not too fast about the tickets, you should try to aim for 350 points to unlock the final so-called meaningful reward of 1 high power stone. So quickly about the stages and a few tips and tricks. I won't go into details on the stages itself. Instead, what I'll do is will also of course release the fight videos, especially on the harder fights, and in those videos I'll cover more in depth about the mechanics, as well as if I have time I will try to also work on the infographics for the Shinryu stages as well. But a couple of tips and tricks. Because all 7 stages are released together, you don't actually have to do them in sequence. So the first tip is to actually work backwards. You should start from the harder fights and work your way upwards to the easier fights, so that you can actually play around and see which of the so-called your best characters in your roster you can use in the harder fights. The easier fights are really extremely easy from base Lufenia upwards, and in those fights you can actually even brute force your way through. So don't worry too much about those. Do try to spend more time putting together a party to handle the part 6 and part 7, because those two are Shinryu difficulty stages. The second tip overall is to plan your parties in advance, at least at a bare minimum the 2 Shinryu stages, but I do recommend to at least also have a look at the 3 base Lufenia stages and roughly plan or divide some of your remaining characters across the 3 Lufenia stages. For the Cosmos and Chaos, really the bosses there die as you sneeze on them, so don't worry about those 2 stages. So once again, cover the Shinryu difficulty stages first. Look at your roster. Try to find similar crystal colors or similar weapon types, because then you can use codes that give you a bonus to the multiplier. So for example here, if you look at my part 7 clear, I use Rinoa and Ares for part 7, which is usually what I do, and my third character is usually Cain, mainly for the off-turn damage. But instead of Cain in part 7, I actually use Cloud of Darkness. The main reason for Cloud of Darkness is Cloud of Darkness shares the same crystal color and same weapon type as Rinoa. So by putting Cloud of Darkness there, I get to actually use the green crystal ×2 code, as well as the unique weapon ×2 code. And then obviously for Ares, she's the odd one out, so I use 1 red crystal and 1 staff code as so. There are also 2 Shinryu stage codes, and you must most definitely select one of the 2 if you want to unlock all the meaningful rewards, because the points that you get from the Shinryu stage code, which is the force effect code, is absolutely massive. It's 24 points. So the one that I use here, for example, is this force weakness. Both are actually different. You can hard click on it to see what they do, but you should most definitely choose at least one of them. If you don't, the stage defaults to the default force weakness. So obviously choose one of the 2 weakness codes. So you can see by doing so, this stage will give me a total of 44 points. And because this is a Shinryu stage, there is a 2.2 bonus multiplier to the points. So completing the stage with these codes will give me 88 points overall. You want to try to choose obviously the codes that gives you the most points for the Shinryu stages, because they have the highest multiplier. But of course, it can get extremely challenging if you choose, for example, 3 times unique or 3 times green crystal. So what I recommend is that there is actually a bit of leeway here. As you can see, I didn't actually choose, the triple unique or triple green crystal, but I still managed to get maximum score, or at least, a score above 425, which unlocks even the ticket rewards. So there is a little bit of leeway across all the stages, but you should look through your roster. So as you put through your party, for example, let me just remove the filters. So as you put your party together for the fight, you should try to look out for synergies, in terms of same crystal colors and same weapon types, so that you can then select the codes with higher points while still putting together a party that sort of works for the stage, and have maybe one party member out of the 3 that has the different code, so that you can at least put together a party that still works relatively well together. Another good example here is stage 6. I did get 93 points overall. So for stage 6, I use often party of Core, Oren, and Machina. And the strategy, of course, is to use Core's FR. So the synergy there is that Oren and Machina both are black crystals, so I can at least use the black crystal times 2 code. However, the one drawback on that stage is that all 3 weapon types are different. So there's 1 great sword, 1 unique weapon, and 1 short sword. So I had to choose 1 and 1 and 1, which results in slightly lower points overall. So coming from the Shinryu stages to the Lufenia stages, you really only need FRs for the 2 Shinryu stages. The Lufenia stages can be easily done even without FRs, especially if you have more recently released characters. So what I would recommend for the Lufenia stages is that if you haven't used any of your ×3 codes yet, use your remaining ×3 codes for the Lufenia stages. And that's because the Lufenia stages still at least have a 1.5 times multiplier to the points. And so, you at least get the multiplier to the ×3 codes, whereas versus for the Chaos and Cosmos stage, the bonus multiplier gets significantly lower. Don't worry too much about the Lufenia stages. You should at least also consider the Lufenia orb. Similar to the Shinryu Force Effect orb codes, there are 3 Lufenia orb codes, and each code provides you a whopping 20 points, so you should most definitely assign 1 code to each stage. So take some time to study the codes. So for example, this code requires you to inflict break on count target, or if you do 7 or more HP dumps in 1 turn, you can increase the Lufenia orb, which is more or less built for Ardyn. So if you have Ardyn, this is probably the code that you want to pick. So take your time to look through the different codes, assign 1 to each stage, and of course build your party around the codes. Again, trying to hit the highest multiplier that you can. There is still some leeway here, even if you've already took a little bit of liberty in the Shinryu stages. So for example here, I actually used Tifa in stage number 5, even though there isn't really a fist code. So you can see there is no fist weapon type here, so Tifa actually was not represented by any code, and I did lose a fair bit of points there. Overall, in terms of weapon types, and I guess this is close to the end of the video, there is no fist and there is no spear weapon type at all. So as far as possible, try to avoid using those characters unless you absolutely have to. For example, if you want to use Tifa to help you pass through one of the stages with much easier time, then you can still do so. But do know that the more liberties that you take, the harder it is for you to meet the overall points required to unlock all the rewards. So plan in advance, try to do a rough estimate of the points that you can get, and then run through the stages here. So that's it anyway for this video. I hope it's been somewhat helpful, and stay tuned for my videos, at least for the Shinryu difficulty stages. I've actually done the recording already. I just need a little bit of time to do the edits for those. See you guys.